To all our viewers and followers across the African continent, in Europe, the Americas, the Caribbean islands, the Middle East, and all around the world, welcome to the official premiere of the Africa Today broadcast, coming to you from BTM television studios here in Kampala, Uganda, East Africa. I'm your host, Douglas Madrega. Join me on this revolutionary and visionary journey every Saturday, 9 to 9:30 p.m. East African time. Do not miss as we go on these very profound and very awakening episodes of how we can rebuild and revive this ancient glory of the African empire. We will be broadcasting every Saturday, 9 to 9:30 p.m. East Africa time. Do not miss. On this television broadcast, we will focus mainly on the social, political, and economic faculties of the African continent, delving deep into her rich history, heritage, and culture, asking ourselves how in the world Africa got to the place that she is in today, but more importantly, providing a platform between the Africans on the continent and the Africans in the diaspora to come together. It's a collective initiative, and begin to take affirmative collectively to dig this ancient glory of an empire out of the ashes of poverty, war, hunger, disease, and hopelessness. Now, in the eyes of the international community, Africa is like a product that is already packaged and branded. Africa and her people have been packaged and branded as poor, as hopeless, diseased, dying, war-torn, savaged economically, savaged socially and politically, in dire need of Western or foreign assistance. We have been labeled the continent of the hopeless and faithless people without a future. But the question is, on this podcast, we will be answering this question. How does the African continent, which is the seat of the world's natural resources, the most fertile land is on the African continent, which is capable of feeding the entire world, with the youngest and most vibrant, innovative, and inventive population. How does such a people, such a continent, then find herself labeled as beggars before the eyes of the international community? I say, if we are to transform the African continent, we have got to change the story. It is up to the people of African descent on the continent and in the diaspora to work collectively together. And on this broadcast, we will be providing that avenue, the platform of collective action, that we may build this ancient glory of an empire back to her ancient cultural, political, social, and economic glory. Digging the African continent out of poverty and hunger and disease and war is up to you, African child, and I, collectively together. And on this broadcast, we will bring you the greatest minds that we have alive on the continent, men and women of African descent, of valor, of great substance, philosophers, historians, and scholars, to share with us from their pool and wealth of wisdom and knowledge, to speak to our audience, that we may cross-pollinate each other, that we may see to it that the African continent is revived back to our ancient glory, that we may break the dependency on foreign aid, even when we produce most, if not all, of the necessary rare earth minerals that are very necessary in producing lots of the products which we then import. That is the question. How do we collectively rebuild the African continent and the African people back to the glory that she had before these two ancient evils of colonialism and slavery? Now we know that at the heart of the social, political, and economic pandemic that has for centuries plagued the African continent, at the heart of all of this devastation are two of the ancient evils that we are all very conversant with: colonialism and slavery. Displaced our people, completely devastated our politics, our economics, and our social spectrum of things, our culture and our history, all were poisoned. And slavery took away our able-bodied men and women. And to this very day, we can boldly and proudly say that the Western empires were solely built on the blood, on the sweat and tears of the African continent and her people. So on this journey, join me and do not miss. We will be unraveling the mysteries that surround Africa from the past, present, and asking ourselves, what does the future hold for the African people and the African continent? Do not miss an episode. Now, on our premiere episode, allow me to leave you with some of the thoughts of our greatest philosophers, historians, and scholars that we have on the African continent and in the diaspora. First is my very good friend and brother, Phil Scott, founder of the African Diaspora News Channel, to share with us his very profound and very visionary thoughts on how we can collectively rebuild the African continent from the roots back to her ancient glory. Phil Scott, please, you're welcome to the show.
During the promo, I spoke about how the wealth of Africa is underneath your feet. And many people, from what I have heard, liked I had talked about that. And we're going to expand on that in this particular segment today. Now, we're going to look at a story that actually came out maybe about a year or so ago out of Blvd in Uganda, around central Uganda area. And you have a company that is controlling a gold mine in that area by the name of Africa Gold Refinery. OK, that particular company isn't owned by a Ugandan whatsoever. This company is out of Belgium. And we're going to get to talking about them and definitely how I feel as a Black American about any Mzungu owning anything in the African continent. Now, they had a local gold miner at the time by the name of Jalia Namatovu. Now, she was a small time gold miner. They never had any kind of regulation on gold mining. If you had the skills to do it, you can go do it. What ended up happening is that the government says, OK, we need to make it strict. You need to have a license to gold mine. So that ended up hurting a lot of your local Ugandan people that was gold mining. And it started to favor the Mzungu, who has a lot of money. OK, so when the young woman by the name of Jalia talked about the gold mine that was in there, she stated it's owned by a Mzungu. He said, villagers say the company put crocodiles in the river so we can't get in. He said they get the water from somewhere else now. So listen to what these Mzungus done in your country. They come all the way from Belgium in Europe, go and take Ugandans' gold mine that belongs to Ugandans, period. OK, it don't belong to no Mzungu. How long is the Mzungu going to live off of Africans? They can't do nothing for themselves. They took my ancestors from the continent of Africa and shipped us to America because they could not build America by themselves at all. These people have not done anything for themselves. They try to act like they're so superior to Black people, African people, but they never can live on their own. Why aren't they in Belgium trying to get resources out of there? Why they constantly being in Uganda or going to other African nations, being part of conflicts, getting conflict gold out of the Democratic Republic of the Congo? This Mzungu has been having his hands in all kind of conflicts with African people, benefiting while the African people are suffering. Local Ugandans is not part of the gold boom. Now, the gold boom that they was talking about, and within 10 years shipped out 514 million US dollars, which in turn end up being 1.9 trillion Ugandan shillings shipped out of Uganda, going to Belgium and different places throughout Europe. Now, let's ask yourself this question. Do you think that the US, the UK, different places in Europe would allow a Ugandan company to come into these countries that the Mzungus are running and take the resources from their countries and ship it back to Uganda? No, they will not. How many Ugandan or different African militaries have bases in the United States, France, Europe? How many? We already know the answer to that question. Yet it is allowed in African nations to allow France, the UK, the US, and many other, Russia, and many other factions to have active military in the continent. But you cannot have your military in their countries. Why is that? Why is that even allowed? You understand? Think about it. $1.9 trillion. Do you know it can do for Ugandan shillings? It could do for the people. See, when I said that the wealth is underneath your feet, is right there in just one city. You have all that coming out. 1.9 trillion that can benefit the people. See, one thing the people have to realize is that you're going to have to put aside tribalism and focus and look at the world, looks at us all the same, whether you from America, the UK, you from Uganda, South Africa. The world sees us as all African. They don't care what language you speak. They don't care about what tribe you're from. You're all African. Because one thing, when the Mzungus come in, the Chinese, the Lebanese, the Indian, anybody else is coming into your countries, they don't care about no different division. All they see themselves as Chinese. All they see themselves as Mzungu. So they coming in to take from you. These people don't mean any good when they come to African countries. They have proven that since colonialism to now. Ugandans aren't benefiting. If you as a people would take control and get rid of all the Mzungus and the Indians and the Arabs and all these different groups of people that's controlling your resources, and let the local people mine and the local people sell it at what it's worth to the world, then Uganda and many other places can benefit. But as long as you allow the Mzungus to come in and to control your resources and mine all your resources, you will continue to stay poor. You will never have a good life. Many of you want to come to the US and go to the Europe. Well, the reason why Europe looks that way is because they're taken from you. The day that Africans cut off all of these different groups of people from coming in and stealing, I call it stealing from you, it's a day they're going to become third world and Africa going to be first world. That's the only way it can happen. The wealth is in your hands, but take a page out of their book. If they won't allow you to go to their countries and take from them, why do you allow them to come into your countries and take from you? You need African nationalism is what you need. Because African nationalism is the only thing that's going to save Africa. Because if you don't create an African nationalism real quick, and the code is we all are African first, and if you're not African, you need to go to your country because we are tired of everybody taking from us, you won't have Africa long. You're not going to have Uganda. You're not going to have anything because all these different groups are coming in to take it from you. Trust me on this. I know their history. I watched what they've done in America, through Europe. I've watched what they've done in Uganda. They have done nothing but harm to black people, African people. It's time to take our country back. It's time to take the continent back. It's time. And the first step is taking your resources so you can have the wealth that you deserve.
Very profound views from Mr. Phil Scott. I agree with everything that he said. The transformation that must happen in the African continent is up to we, the African people, not focusing on the West, focusing on the people that have exploited us for centuries to help us out, with economics and politics and our social, faculties. That is an error. Thank you, my brother Phil. Now, another very internationally recognized person, I'm sure that our viewers are very well, versed with him. Dr. Maponga Joshua, seasoned, Pan-African, celebrated man.
I'm here to be representing the Ubuntu Nation, an initiative intended to organize the dominions of the African kingdoms around the globe altogether. as far as America, Australia, Europe, China, India, and Southern Africa, including our diaspora, the American and Americas. That includes Brazil and Peru and beyond. The African nation is in the business of putting ourselves together as one nation so that we can begin to have conversations on how can we come together as a nation. Important to this event is the issue that every African person must begin to have a savings plan. A savings plan, R1 per day, $1 per day, £1 per day, yen per day. Put these savings for yourselves, your wife, and your children, and begin to have a personal savings plan. These plans of savings coming together into a community, into a nation, we actually discover that if 1.2 billion people can put aside $1 per day as an African nation, we can actually raise ourselves enough money to build our own reserves in terms of our own banking systems and buy back anything else that the European people and the Chinese and the Indians might be suffocating out of us. It is important for the African child to begin to think that we as a nation, no one is coming to liberate us unless we can liberate ourselves. So we're here to develop the individual, develop the family, develop the community, ultimately develop the nation. Ubuntu Nation is an initiative that gives us a new narrative from where we started in terms of our genesis. How do we relate to colonialism? How do we relate to culture? How do we also align ourselves in terms of our own spirituality and our rituals so that we can develop for ourselves a new narrative that our own children can begin to grow and develop from? Ubuntu Nation is your organization. I want to challenge you that you will start Googling, find out the resources. Please start this plan with you for the Crocodile Nation, which is the Southern Hemisphere. This includes Swaziland, Lesotho, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Zambia, Malawi, and all the countries in the Southern Hemisphere. I will be your point of contact here in the Southern Hemisphere. But we've divided the whole world into 9 dominions with 2 chapters, and we will be able to find yourselves anywhere on the face of the earth where our identity, our purpose, and reason of existence is identified by our contributions to our own communities. So you as an individual, you need a personal ritual which grows into your family rituals, which grows into your community rituals, which then grows into your national rituals. These nations and dominions come together to build what we now call Ubuntu Nation. We are here at a seriously advanced level, developing our own currency, claiming land back to its rightful owners, restoring indigenous knowledge and indigenous governance systems. And please watch the space as we are going forward, as we'll be able to start discussing and having our own conversations. How does the African child liberate himself from the colonialization that has gone through us, abused us, and taken away our own resources? My name is Maponga Joshua, Shigarampoko Garamashamba Huda, here from the Crocodile Nation. I stand here as the Grand Minister for the Grand African Ubuntu Nation. Get yourself connected. This is the organization that will assist us to grow our own wealth, our own purpose, our own history, and connect one with the other, including our brothers and sisters in diaspora who want to come back home. How do you get yourself your own totems, your own sernems, getting yourself wives on the mainland, and also being able to access your own land in your own motherland? And it's enough time that the African child has been looking for solutions from people of lands afar here on the African nation, Ubuntu Nation. We are restoring the African nation to its rightful place and begin to have a discussion about our own civilizations. We are not sidelines on the development of our own history. We are participants on this particular history. Maponga J, on your Ubuntu Nation.
Very, very profound thoughts from Dr. Maponga Joshua. And it's always a blessing to have you and to always have you on this broadcast. Now allow me to introduce another very outspoken international public speaker, Dr. Hosea Tagara, founder and CEO of Wealth Masters Global, to speak to us from an economic perspective, because he is a very celebrated economist, very internationally recognized person. Please, Dr. Tagara, speak to us on what your thoughts are regarding the economic faculty of the African continent, right from a historical perspective to the present times. Welcome to the Africa Today broadcast.
The debt situation for Africa is not simply because of her borrowing. Borrowing has always been part of the economic process of value creation. But what Africa requires is a paradigm shift, especially as pertaining to the intention behind the borrowing. Consumptive borrowing is an eternal death trap. We need to shift from this kind of borrowing to productive borrowing and value capacitating and value creating borrowing. And such a value system has to be upheld from an individual level. It has to percolate the family structure. It has to characterize the communities of Africa. It has to be reflected within cities and nations, and the motherland has to adopt such kind of a corporate continental value system. I believe, and I'm fully persuaded, that with the primary resources and the mineral wealth that we have in the continent, it is very, very possible, not in the far future, but in the very near future, for Africa to rise up to be an economic giant that the world has never seen. There is about to be a shift in the economic landscape of the world. The pointers of the pursuit and of the battleground of economics around the world is pointing unequivocally to the place that Africa has to play in the global economy. And it's very important for you as an African, for me as an African, to be positioned mentally, to be positioned physically, economically in the playing field as a people that know that we are in the home ground of the biggest economic match that's about to be engaged in the world over. It's time for Africa, and Africa has to rise to become the economic giant that she has always been destined to be.
Very, very profound and awakening views and ideology from Dr. Tagara, and we look forward to having you on the show always. Now, our last but not least of our contributors today for our premiere episode is Amina McCummins, very good sister from Michigan. She's into the banking and agricultural, sectors, and she's got some very peculiar ideologies on how we can rebuild working together. Amina Angela McCummins, welcome to the Africa Today broadcast.
Hi, my name is Amina, and I want to talk about how slavery and colonialism has displaced the African woman and how we need to reposition ourselves in this age of industrialism and technology. The African woman has been forced into a caregiver and almost a maid role. When I think back on my own grandmother and how she would wake up in the morning and take several buses to go out to be a housekeeper and cook for white families, ironically, I find myself in a similar situation where I'm getting up early in the morning and I'm on a 40-minute commute to only go to work and, spend 9 and 10 hours to commute back home and be so tired that I'm not even able to engage with my family, oftentimes leaving them feeling neglected. And this is just a vicious cycle that we're seeing with the African woman, where she is made to feel as if she needs to sacrifice herself and care for everyone else over her own family. A solution for this is for us to be intentional and redefine what we think success is. We have to be intentional and set an end date for our time in these jobs and these places, and we're going to have to use all of our efforts and all of our energy to return home to our families and give them all of the energy and engagement that they need to be successful. We're going to have to start by being intentional, setting up a viable plan setting up an end date, deciding when we're going to actually exit these jobs, coming up with a plan for how we're going to replace this income, coming up with businesses that will, involve our whole family so that we can come back together and, stimulate our creative juices and, bring in the income we need to move our families forward. And getting out of the system and getting off of this hamster wheel is going to be the only way that we can truly move our families forward. I see many other groups who, are seeming effortless as they, practice collective work and responsibility and group economics. And so the template is already there. We just have to, come together and make a conscious decision and effort to come back to our homes and take care of our families and move the African family forward.
That is all we have for our premiere episode. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to catch us every Saturday 9 to 9:30 p.m. East Africa time.